Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. This podcast is dedicated to sharing stories of struggle and triumph, a platform that allows individuals to tell their truth in order to inspire and uplift others. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. Let's jump right in. Hello, and thank you for joining us today for this version of Her Version. This platform is built on storytelling and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing woman named Elizabeth Burrows. Have you ever wanted to edit your life? I know I have. Not make it over, not delete it entirely, but just edit it just a little bit. Elizabeth is here today to talk about her journey through not feeling adequate as a woman, a wife, or a mother, her struggle with expectations, and feeling alone. Today, we are talking real life, the ups and downs of just everyday life, what it means to struggle, and why struggle isn't necessarily a bad thing. I want to welcome Miss Elizabeth. How are you today?
I am amazing and so excited to be here.
Thank you so much, lady. I so appreciate you coming on, chatting with me, and spending some time with myself and the community to share a little bit about who you are, what you do, and your journey to get to this point.
Yes.
How has your week been?
My week has been crazy. So we're just coming off of the heels of an 8-day quarantine over here in my household. My daughter caught a very mild case of COVID, but we had both been exposed. So we were both quarantining and isolating and all that stuff. And today's her first day back to school. So
perfect timing for the Her Version platform.
I know.
I love it. Well, thanks so much for joining me. I would love to kind of just jump in and allow you the floor just to kind of share a little bit about who you are and a little bit about your journey, your past, and then we'll kind of flow from there. Is that cool?
Yeah, absolutely. So my name's Elizabeth, and today I'm excited to say that I am a full-time life coach. Specifically, I'm a mindset coach, which means I help my clients cultivate a mindset that supports them in showing up in life the way they need to so that they get what they want out of life. And I absolutely love what I do. But this is actually new for me, kind of a new career. So my life, this has been my life since the beginning of this year. This is May. So in January 2022, I became a full-time coach, but before that, my career was actually in the public and nonprofit sectors. So I really have had a whole career built on serving others and serving community, and really just trying to leave the world a better place than it was when I arrived. And that's really one of my values. And let me tell you, I think just working to live that way and working to lead, it can be draining sometimes. And it is a very high standard to live up to. And so you can imagine that after being kind of into my career for about a decade and then getting married and starting a family, having a beautiful baby girl with my husband, and wanting to also serve my family, right? And be the best person I could be for my husband and for my daughter. It started to feel like a lot. Yeah. And not just a lot, but like a lot. And I got to a point where I just felt like I was failing at life. And I mean, failing at life. I felt like I was drowning under the expectations that everyone had for me and all of the obligations that I had agreed to. And I felt like I was completely ill-equipped and inadequate to be able to be effective in any position that I held in my life. And as you can imagine, I felt terrible and life kind of sucked because of that. And I don't even know if it was obvious. So I went through kind of a phase of just introspection and just looking for answers. And it led me into the world of self-development, right? And self-help. I stumbled upon the principles of mindset, and that's what I use to kind of make changes in my own life. And in 2017, I started the Life Edit Project. Really, it was just supposed to be a blog so that I could tell people about my own journey. And in 2018, I realized, oh no, like I would actually be better at coaching. And that's a better way to serve my community and have the impact that I want. So I've been coaching since 2018. But really cranked up the volume on my own self-work and serving clients when the pandemic hit, right, in 2020, because that's when life started life and real hard for everyone. Yeah. And yeah, so it's led me to where I am today, which is a very different place.
Yes. Yes. I want to talk a little bit. You mentioned expectations that others had on you. Mm-hmm. Is that you thought they had it on you, or they actually told you?
So it's a little bit of both. And it's so funny because as I was even saying that, I realized that it's not actual expectations that are sometimes the hardest to live up to. It's imagined or perceived expectations. Yeah. And one of the things that I had done or one of the things that I was used to. So as a kid, I was like really good at school, right? So I was an excellent student. I was kind of a goody two shoes, right? So I followed the rules. And so I had kind of built this reputation of being very reliable, very responsible, right? Adults used to call me very mature. Uh-huh. And I was also kind of a peacekeeper. So if there was conflict between different groups of kids at school, right, I was kind of the one that went back and forth between the groups and brokered a peace treaty, right? That was kind of the way I showed up. And over time, I think people expected, or rather, over time, that is how I taught people to relate to me.
Got it.
I showed people that because I was reliable and responsible, that they should ask me to do things, right? Mm-hmm. And I showed people that I was mature, which meant I could handle whatever they threw at me, right? Mm-hmm. And so I kind of built this dynamic where I was doing everything alone, and I was bearing kind of everything at its fullest and hardest, instead of like asking for help and just like being a regular human being. And so I was really good at being strong. Yeah. And whether or not that's what people wanted to expect of me, it's what I taught them to expect of me.
Yeah, definitely. I remember there was this one time I was having just a breakdown early on, baby. My son was probably like 4 months old or something. And baby daddy was still living with me. And I remember crying. He came home and I'm like, I need to take a shower and I have to do dishes and I have to vacuum and I haven't even done this yet, blah, blah. And he goes, who told you you have to do all that? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was like, but I have to, because it's what I saw my mom do. It's what I saw in the magazine. It's what I saw on TV or whatever it was. But these expectations of these things that we think we have to do sometimes isn't necessary. It's like
not necessary. Yeah. Almost nothing is completely necessary. That's the funny thing, right? About life. Like we opt into so many things that we then feel are like hard commitments that we're not allowed to change. And everything is negotiable.
Yeah.
There are very few decisions that we can actually make that we cannot reverse by making another decision in the future. Right. So yeah, for sure. It's so true. And not just the things that we like opt into because we create them, but it really is true that especially as women, we're socialized, right, to see ourselves and envision ourselves in certain positions. And this became really clear to me when I became a mom, right? So, and I think there are so many moms out here that can relate to this, but I want you to pay attention and notice how people talk about motherhood versus how people talk about fatherhood, right? And kind of what's expected of a mom or a dad. But then notice how people talk about parenthood, right? And I think when we as women talk about ourselves as moms, if we start swapping out mom or motherhood with parent or parenthood, it's much easier to see all of the places that we're adding obligations and expectations for ourselves in terms of what we're expected to do or responsibilities that we're expected to handle that don't apply to men as fathers. It's really interesting, and so much of it is invisible.
Yes. This is reminding me of a conversation that I had months ago on how fathers are praised for like taking their kid to the park alone.
Yeah.
But I've done that. Like in my head, I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. Look at him.
Mm-hmm.
But then there's tons of mothers out here that I would never even think to. So, so I'm guilty of that. So.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. But also just think about, we hear the phrase working mom all the time, but literally no one talks about working dads. It's not even a phrase we use because there is no expectation of the role of fatherhood competing with the role of, right, an employee or a worker. But for us as moms, that conflict is built into those roles. That is literally how we're conditioned to see those hats that we wear as competing with each other and being in conflict with each other. Yeah.
Wow. Yes, on all fronts.
Yeah. So becoming a mom, it's like no surprise looking back that it led me to this place of, oh my gosh, I'm being pulled in so many different directions and everyone wants something different from me. And it's so hard to be good at all of these things because if I'm good at work, then I'm neglecting my family, or if I'm a great mom, then I'm neglecting my husband, right? Yeah. It's no wonder that I was feeling that way because that was essentially how I've been conditioned to see those roles. Yeah. But one thing that I learned is that it literally does not matter what society says I should be doing. I always get to decide how I want to show up, and I get to decide who I want to be in any space that I occupy. So what is kind of so amazing about the work that I did, 2018 was just like 2017 and 2018 were just such transformative years for me. And literally nothing about my life changed, right? Like I was still part of all of the groups that I was a part of, and I was still a wife, and I was still a mom, and I was still working a full-time job that was more than just like a 9-to-5, right? It required more of me. I was still volunteering. I was still active at church, right? I was still doing all of these things. And the only thing that shifted were my expectations for myself, right? And it actually gave me breathing room to be who I wanted to be in all of those spaces. And I got to decide that being a diligent employee was not in conflict with being a good mom, right? And I got to decide even what being a good mom meant for me, right? Because there's no dictionary definition for good mom.
Yeah. I joke with my son all the time. He's 18 now, but his whole life I've joked like it's just an experiment. Like I have no idea what I'm doing. 100%. And I tell him that to his face. I'm like, I have no clue what I'm doing. I don't pretend to be an expert. So yeah, I totally agree. I want to ask, as far as your journey and where you have come from, all the way up into where you are now, what do you think has been your biggest challenge that you've had to overcome? And then what did you learn from that challenge?
My biggest challenge has been learning how to make decisions. So I used to identify as a chronic procrastinator. And what I actually have realized, and this is actually a new realization, is that it wasn't procrastination per se that was my problem. It was my inability to decide what I was going to do. And kind of that failure to make decisions and that failure to take action is what kept me stuck. And to me, that just looked like procrastination. Right. And so I've learned to challenge myself to take bold action or to make decisions faster. Once I realized that, like, I was dragging my feet on things simply because I wasn't deciding what I wanted or how I wanted to show up, it opened up the door for me to actually take charge and get through things much faster. It's amazing what deciding and sticking to a decision can actually do for opening up your schedule, right? And clarifying what kind of commitments you have on your plate. Yeah, that was definitely my biggest decision. And I think that was hard because I don't remember ever really being taught that certain parts of life were really up to me.
Choices, yeah.
Yeah, right. I think for so long I was really just taught that, like, this is the path that you're on. And so you just kind of move from milestone to milestone, right? And that this is what life is supposed to look like. And I didn't realize that the path was my choice, and that what my own milestones for success, that even those things were my choice. So that was a huge struggle for me, because making decisions at some point meant that I was going to be showing up differently than what someone else expected of me.
Yeah, definitely. Did your whole thought process, when you started to realize that you could make choices, was that when you started to step into self-development, or are those two different stories?
No, it's the same. It's the same. I would say I found the world of self-development, and somewhere up in there, I learned that I had choices and I started to recognize the choices. And then I started to give myself permission to choose, right? So It was not immediate. Yeah. There were some decisions that I think were easier for me to make than others. And there were some decisions that felt more urgent for me to make, because there were just some things in my life that were so heavy. I was like, if I can lighten this burden by making a decision, then that's what I want to do, right? And then there were other decisions that weren't as important, but they were annoying if I didn't make them, or if I was letting other people choose for me. Those, like, the consequences of outsourcing decisions to other people was really uncomfortable. And once I learned to recognize that too, then I got to kind of reclaim some of my choices.
Absolutely. I still remember it was a huge turning point for me when I realized I could make choices. And I remember everywhere I went, I would be like, I have a choice.
Yes.
The number one thing that I would tell people, like, I have a choice. Yeah. I have choices. Did you know that you have choices?
Yes.
Because it was such a unknown, like, treasure that I had dug up. And I had no idea. It's so crazy.
Yeah. And I think even part of that is just recognizing that sometimes it feels like we have no choice because we don't like the choices that are in front of us, right? Like, the things that we get to choose between, they all suck, right? And when we're in those situations, it can feel like, oh, I have no choice. But no, like, if you actually lean into choosing the sucky thing, it's actually really empowering. Like, and I know it's counterproductive or counterintuitive. It sounds like it would be really deflating to decide on purpose to choose something that you're not happy with. But exercising your own agency in any situation is always an empowering position to be in.
Yeah, definitely. How do you think your daughter has benefited from this?
I'm laughing because
not all parents know this stuff.
Yeah, no. Oh, hands down. For sure. Yeah. Actually, I want to go back to something that you said earlier about motherhood, just like how you tell your son all the time, you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I remember very vividly, I think my daughter was about 2 years old. 2.5 years old. And I remember her, no, maybe she was about 3. And there was something happening at her school for Halloween. And there is some kind of expectation about like having a costume ready for like a parade or something. I don't know what was happening. And it was something like I had gotten an email on it, but got busy, right? Didn't really pay attention to the email. So the thing snuck up on me, and my daughter asks me like the night before, Mommy, do you have XYZ so I can be in the costume parade or whatever? And I was like, no, I don't. And then I was like, well, she'll be disappointed. So let me pull something together last minute, right? So I pulled something together, and I had this flashback to a very similar scenario of me at a young age needing a costume for something, and my parents pulling something together last minute. And I remember feeling like they did not care what I wanted or how I felt. And being in the position of like being the parent that was pulling something together last minute, I realized, oh my gosh, it wasn't that they didn't care. They just like were busy doing the rest of life. Right.
Yeah.
And as parents, we're not perfect. And sometimes we miss things. Right. And then we're stuck, left, we're trying to make the best of it. Right. Yeah. And as a kid, that can often look like, oh, my parents don't care, so they're just doing this ratty thing. When in actuality, it's our parents trying really hard to save the situation. Right. And so I had this realization, like I looked back and just kind of saw what I saw my mom do, and I had new appreciation for it and kind of a new perspective on it. And I was like, oh my gosh, my mom was also a working professional that had not just one kid, like I'm the youngest of 4, right? Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh, my mom was lifing hard and she was doing the absolute best. And I can totally see how having a costume for some random thing at school maybe was not on her radar. I can totally see that had nothing to do with her not caring, that was just the best she could do in that situation. And I was able to realize like none of us have this all figured out. We're all making this up as we go. And we're all just doing the best that we can. And I was able to kind of give myself such grace and compassion in that moment. And I was hoping that my daughter would not experience like what I was doing as me not caring, right? Yeah. So I think just having that awareness that what I'm doing and what my daughter perceives me doing can be different, and being able to like speak to it on purpose makes a world of difference. And so I am aware that my daughter is watching me and she is listening to me and she is trying to emulate me, right? Like she looks up to me so much. And so I am cautious of like what I show her, and I try to show her on purpose that things aren't always easy, and that sometimes I get frustrated or lose my temper, or sometimes I'm sad and I cry, or sometimes I don't want to be touched, right? And I try to tell her that and let her know that none of that has anything to do with how much I love her, so that she's getting these messages early. And knowing that if I take the time to show up as the person I want to be, I'm also giving her permission to do the same for herself.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I was just having a conversation with my mom. I talked to my mom like 2 hours the other day, and I was telling her this story about my dad and how my dad, we were talking about trauma, mm-hmm. and how our father, my father, her husband, used to say to us, don't ever have children. He used to say to his children, don't ever have children. And I was like, that was like a big deal for me, because that in my head, I registered that as he never wanted us.
Yes.
Don't ever do what I did. Yep. And I was telling her that now I'm kind of stuck in, and I held resentment, and still kind of do to this day. Like I'm still kind of like, what the heck? Why would you do that? Why would you say that? It's so unnecessary. But now my son is 18, and I had him out of wedlock. I got pregnant out of wedlock with his father, using no birth control, the pull-out method, and not my doing, his father's doing. I was just so naive and like had no voice and didn't like, whatever. I have a million excuses. So now I'm stuck with a son who's 18, and I now having to sit down with him and tell him, hey, don't do what I did.
Mm.
And I was telling my mom, and I was crying. I'm like, it feels very similar to the hurt that I felt from dad by him saying that. But he had his reasons for saying it. He was probably low on money, he had 3 kids, you know, he's like trying to make ends meet. And he's sitting around being like, don't do what I did. Like, don't have 3 kids. And now I'm having to sit down and have a very similar conversation with my son that could be hitting him in a very similar way of, you never wanted me.
Yeah.
You know, don't do what I did. Ooh. So it's interesting, you know, as we turn and we have our own children and we come across our own hurdles that we're coming through as parents, that sometimes we, just like what you said, which is why I'm telling the story, sometimes we recognize why our parents did or said whatever they said, and it makes more sense.
Yep.
Now that we're older.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I don't think there's ever such a thing as like perfect communication between parents and children, because we're in different places, right? We're speaking from different perspectives and different levels of experience, right? And so, but I do believe that the more awareness we have of both how we perceived something that we like an experience with our parents, right? And the more awareness we have of what it is we're actually trying to communicate and what we're actually trying to teach our children, all of that allows us to reach a higher level of communication, right? Yeah. And just kind of narrow that gap between what we mean and what they take away.
I love that you're saying that, because my dad said that one sentence to us all the time versus me. I'm sitting down and having long conversations with my son about how I love you. I say that I love you. However, I would never change anything for myself. However, you know, I wouldn't wish this. Like if I had to choose it for somebody else, I wouldn't wish this on somebody else. So here's condoms, and you know, please use protection. And it's important for you, and it's important for the women who you are, you know, engaging with, to be protected. And, you know, that her responsibility and also your responsibility, not just her responsibility. So having ongoing, not just one conversation, but ongoing conversations about stuff like that. So yeah, to what you're saying, yes, do it, just do it differently, with more conversation.
Yeah. Which also means like when I'm scrambling for that last minute costume, right? Yeah. I'm not just doing it and handing it off to my daughter and expecting her to love it the way she would love a perfectly planned costume, right?
Yeah.
It means that I'm also explaining, I'm so sorry, right? Like I forgot, but here is what I can do for you now.
Yeah.
And I hope that you still have a good time, right? It means saying all of that, right?
Yeah.
Which can be hard as a parent, because part of it is, you know, we want our children to believe in us and trust us and see us as protectors and providers. Mm-hmm. And sometimes showing that vulnerability or, you know, owning up to our mistakes can be in conflict, right, with that position of authority. But we're teaching them so much more
100%.
About what it really means to show up and to be responsible, right? Like I'm not just my daughter's mom, I'm also her teacher.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like I am teaching her so many different things, whether I do it intentionally or not. So I want to be intentional with at least the things that I'm aware of.
Definitely. What do you think is the number one lesson you've learned from life?
Oh man, the number one. Okay. So I think the number one thing that I have learned, like all over the place, is what I'm doing is never as important as who I'm being. What I'm doing is just never the real thing. It's never what really matters. If I'm being the person that I want to be, and if I'm being a higher version of myself, then the doing takes care of itself. And when I only focus on what I should be doing, it actually takes me into a cycle of second guessing myself, trying to do as much as possible in order to please others, right? trying to work my way to prove that I'm worth something, right? And that I'm worthy of love and affection and, right, all of these wonderful relationships. And none of that is true. If I just be a loving person, if I can be a loving mom, right? If I can be an attentive wife, then the doing takes care of itself.
Yeah, definitely. Wow, what I'm doing is not as important as who I am being.
Yeah, seriously, like number one lesson.
Love this. All falls into place when you are being great points.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. As far as, you know, success. And, especially you were talking about motherhood, you were talking about working moms, using your own journey and what you've been through. What would be your definition of success?
Oh, so I think one of the most important lessons that I learned kind of early on into that journey is that success looks different during different seasons of life.
I love that.
And especially like in parenthood, when you have a new baby, right? Like no one knows this as much as parents know this, right? Like a newborn, right, is different than an infant. An infant is different than a toddler, right? A toddler is different than a child, right? And all of these phases happen, and what you need to be successful, like to successfully rear your child or deal with your child during those periods is different, and it changes, right? And some of those seasons are shorter, some are longer, right? And it's important to kind of recalibrate for every single season. And I realized that one of the mistakes that I had made was not calibrating for success in the right season. So this is so funny. And I'm slightly embarrassed every time I tell this story because I'm like, why did I believe this? So when I got pregnant, I had an amazing pregnancy, right? I was healthy and happy, like zero, like I didn't even have morning sickness. I think I threw up one time during my entire pregnancy, and that was literally when I was in labor, right? So I had I had one of the easiest pregnancies. And I went in for my delivery, and I had a wonderful delivery. I was able to deliver natural with no medications. And so I was very happy for that. Kind of a relatively simple recovery, right? Like it was a very like nice, lovely story. And I had this vision, had this expectation that so because I was so healthy and I had such kind of an easy pregnancy, I was able to kind of keep doing all of the things that I had been doing for like very late into my pregnancy, right? Like I went to work the day before I went into labor, right? So like that is how much like that was how okay I was and how normal life was until the day my daughter arrived. And I took 8 weeks off of work for maternity leave. And I expected myself after maternity leave to step back into what my life looked like pre-delivery.
Oh,
right. It was so silly. And it was just so naive of me, right? So I thought, right, because I had also lots of family support. So I live basically in the same community where I grew up. My parents are here. I have 2 of my 3 sisters that live here in town, right? So I had just my husband's family lives in town, right? So we just have lots of support that is around us. And honestly, shout out to single moms, because I don't know how people raise kids without like a family system in place, because it was hard for me with all of that support around me. And I just have so much respect for anyone who does it with less. So shout outs to everybody that is making it work. But so because I think I had all this support, I just kind of expected that I would be able to keep doing everything that I had been doing, because I didn't have any lingering health complications, right, from pregnancy or delivery. My daughter, right, didn't have any complications as a baby, and she had a really good temperament, right? She was kind of easy to care for. And so I took 8 weeks off, right? My maternity leave. And I kind of took my maternity leave, not just from work, but from other commitments. And then I tried to jump right back into everything. And of course, it was a nightmare, right? It did not at all work out that way. Everything needed adjustments. And so the expectation that I had for myself to just like that my life as a mom was going to be the same as my life before being a mom, just now with a baby. Like that is not what happens. It's literally a whole new life. Yeah. And so I had to recalibrate for that season. And then, you know, once my daughter was a little older and she started going to school, we eased her into school, you know, 2 and 3 days a week. Right. So once we started easing her into school, like I thought that, oh, she's not a baby anymore. Right. So now it's easier. No, just the challenges were different. But now there's a school that's expecting my daughter to get there on time and to be like clean and in a uniform. Like it was crazy. Right. So I learned that calibrating for success based on the season of life that I was in was incredibly important, because if not, I was just setting myself up for frustration and disappointment.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Where are you at now?
Now I'm somewhere where I've never been. And I'm actually trying to figure out what success looks like for me in this stage of life. So pre-pandemic, I was still working in my full-time career. I was in the nonprofit sector. I was going into the office every day. I had a bit of a commute. My daughter was in school. And now I am working from home. I make my own schedule, right? I'm a full-time coach and not in that sector. And my daughter goes to school while I work from wherever I have Wi-Fi and relative quiet, right? So I have different opportunities and I get to figure out what I want for myself right now. And then that gets to be what success looks like. So while I figure it out, I've given myself permission to just be okay, and actually to be thrilled with working with any level of clients, making sure my daughter is succeeding in school, right? So making sure that she's getting her homework done and maintaining good grades and, you know, being in contact with the folks at school, right? To handle anything that comes up, and being able to spend some time with my family and maintaining a good relationship with my husband. Like right now, that's what success looks like. And I'm sure in 6 months, it might look a little different. So. Did
you have to change any like beliefs to get to where you are now? We talk a lot of times in the coaching arena as far as limiting beliefs. And to get from where you were to where you are now, did you have to alter any of those beliefs?
Oh yeah, a lot.
Tell me one main one, or two main ones, whatever you want.
I used to be really deep into the belief of I'm not enough. And I carried that belief with me everywhere. I carried it with me to work. I lived there in my marriage. I carried that, you know, in motherhood. I carried it into my family relationships, into my friendships, like, and that belief I'm not enough actually prevented my business from growing as fast as maybe it otherwise would have. That belief was one that I had to dismantle and disrupt in order to be where I am now. And it's funny that you say this, because so I'm a person that doesn't do New Year's resolutions. I choose a one word for the year.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah. And my one word for 2022 is complete. Yeah. And when I found that word, so I don't just like pick random words. I wait for like God to drop a word into my spirit, and then tell me what it means for me. And when the word complete came to me for 2022, I was like, oh, this is so different than where I've been, because it's about believing in sufficiency. It's about believing that I already have everything that I need. It's about believing that even the things that I do need that I don't have yet are on their way. It's about believing that I have a complete skill set to succeed at being a coach. It's about believing that I have complete love to be able to be the kind of wife and mom that I want to be. It's about believing that I am already a complete and whole person, and I am not broken. Like, I don't need to be or anyone else other than who I am. And I am enough for the life that is ahead of me.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love
that. Yeah. So, and it's so funny because I never could have believed 4 years ago. I never could have believed that. I would have argued with that thought. I just would have been like, yeah, absolutely not. And here's why. I have all of these reasons why I'm not enough. That would have been my thought process 4 years ago. Yeah.
Too funny. I want you to talk a little bit about your definition of editing your life. Yes. And your business and what you do.
Yeah. Okay. So it's so funny. I came up with the term life edit project for my business. Really, I kind of stumbled into it. At the time, for whatever reason, I was very not obsessed, but I was very influenced by all of the extreme makeover shows that were happening. I feel like at that time, like Extreme Makeover Home Edition was like the big thing that was on TV. Mm-hmm. And people were still talking about extreme makeovers and all that stuff. And I was kind of grossed out.
Swan.
But no.
The Swan was like, women would come in, lose weight, get a complete makeover, hair, makeup, outfit, and plastic surgery.
Yeah.
So they literally were totally insane.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so go ahead.
Yes. So that whole thing, right? So this was happening with people, and this was happening with houses, right? And I remember just being so grossed out by the concept of, one, feeling like you can't be you, right? Like I felt like shows like that were sending the message that all you have to do is change everything about you and then your life will be great. Right?
Yeah.
And the whole, like, the other thing that made it so unappealing to me was that for most people, being able to make all of those sweeping changes all at once was completely unrealistic. Who has the resources to be able, right? Like, and not just money, but time, because you have to take time away if you're going to step out of your life, buy a whole new wardrobe, buy a whole new body, right? Make over here, like all of that stuff takes time.
Yeah.
And it's like, and significant resources, right? And it's like, who has the resources to completely stop their life, hit a reset button, wait for the change to take place, and then like resume? Like, who can actually do that?
Yeah.
That level of transformation is not just unrealistic, but it's inaccessible for most people. Yeah. And I felt like people were being sold on this dream that didn't even exist. And so I was just appalled, right? But more than that, once I started getting into like the world of mindset, and I realized that nothing in my life needed to change, that I just needed to shift, right? That tiny shifts in how I was thinking drastically changed how I felt in my life, right? Mm-hmm. And that was it, right? It wasn't that I needed life to be different. I wanted to feel different about the life that I had. And I was like, it's not everything else that needs to change. Like, I just need little shifts. And I was doing a lot of writing, both creatively and in my job. And so I thought about editing, and I was like, oh yes, this is very much like the process of editing, right? It's not about like scrapping the whole paper and throwing it in the garbage and starting over from scratch, but you can make huge, meaningful changes by rearranging the order that something is in, by tweaking a word or two. You can delete a sentence, you can add some punctuation, right? Like, there are so many different things that you can do to refine and improve what is already there. It doesn't, you don't need to like scrap everything, right? And I was like, yes. So why can't we do that like with ourselves and with our lives? And I was also really into kind of the DIY movement. I'm a crafter at heart. And so I was thinking about DIY, and I was always working on different projects, right? And so I was like, oh, my project, like my DIY project is really just my life and myself, right? And so I mushed all of those together and came up with the Life Edit project. But I was like, this is the approach that I want to use to help other people make changes, because I didn't need to become a whole different person. I got to completely and radically alter how I felt in my life by just making a series of edits, like small, tiny edits that drastically changed everything.
Yeah.
And everybody can make a little tweak, right? Editing is completely accessible. Yeah. So that is how I land there. And I really do use that approach in working with clients. I like to help clients first just like be aware of what's there. So kind of mindfulness and awareness is one of the first things that I will work on with folks, because you can't make any decisions about what it is that you want to change or how you want to edit it if you are not aware of what your starting point is.
Got it.
So so that is huge to my approach of working with folks. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And I think you're so right. I can definitely go back and remember times in my life where I thought, I wish I could just stop everything and just work on this one thing. And that's not realistic. You can't.
It's often not, right?
Yeah.
And so if it's not realistic, then let's stop trying to solve the problem that way, right? Let's find a different way. What does work? What are our choices? What are our options, right? Yeah. What can we do with what we have?
Exactly.
Let's instead of believing that it's not enough, and that we need something different, let's believe that what we have is enough, and we just get to relate to it differently and tweak it.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that the whole storyline, as far as this platform that's being created here with her version, is very much that. It's not stories of, hey, I was able to concentrate on this one issue solely. The story comes from, this happened, and while this happened, also these 4 other things happened.
Yep.
And that's what creates the resilience. That's what creates the your ability to be able to get through the struggle, create confidence, and thus courage, to be able to navigate through your life as you're going along. And I actually, while you were telling that story, I was thinking to myself, what a disservice to those people, because now in their life in real time, they're coming across challenges, and they're going to revert back to that time when they were able to take 3 months or 6 months off in order to concentrate on this one thing. And that's going to hover and almost discourage them from really being able to make shifts in their life going forward, because they're always going to revert back to, oh, if I just had 3 months or just had 6 months to dedicate to this, then I could, versus,
right.
I did this through all of this.
Yes.
So I actually kind of felt empathy while you were speaking for these individuals, and they're probably not all like that, but I'm certain that there are some that do that go back and say like, hey, I can't accomplish this because I don't have 3 months to take off. That's how I do things.
Absolutely.
I love
absolutely. That. Yeah.
Very nice. Rethink a solution. Okay. I love that.
Yeah. Rethink a solution, right? So if we are constantly, so I was actually talking with clients about this, I think as recently as yesterday, getting the diagnosis right for what's actually bothering us or challenging us is incredibly important, because the diagnosis influences the cure, right? It informs the cure. Yeah. So when we think about, or when we tell ourselves that we have a certain kind of problem, when we tell ourselves, I don't have a good marriage, right? Or I'm married to the wrong person, then the solution we're looking for is being with a different person, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if we start to think about our situation as being, I'm not in the kind of relationship that I want, or I'm not getting the kind of intimacy that I want, right? Well, now we have different solutions that are available to us. So the cure for not having the kind of intimacy you want is to find ways to deepen and enhance intimacy, right? And you can do that with whoever you're with if you choose to do that, right? So instead of beating your head against a wall that is, a solution that you're convinced does not exist for you, find a solution for what does.
Yes. I love it. I love it. I love it. If people wanted to find more about you, can they go to the website? Is that your website right above your?
Yes, that is my website, lifeeditproject.com. And I'm on social media. My handle is at Life Edit Project, all one word. I'm on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter as well. I'm probably the most active on Instagram, but I've also got kind of a nice archive of previous Facebook lives on my Facebook page that are nice and juicy to go through. Yeah, for sure.
I love it. I love it. Well, I want to thank you so much, Elizabeth, for being here. I also want to thank those of you that are hanging out, watching us live right now. And for those of you that were leaving comments and questions and stuff like that, we always appreciate the collaboration here while we speak. For those of you watching on the replay, make sure you hashtag replay before you jump off so we know that you were here and what platform you were watching us on, and we can shoot you some love. Yes. Elizabeth, do you have any closing thoughts before we wrap up?
I want everybody to be able to own their own power. You have power no matter what situation you're in. And the key to accessing your power is to own the choices that you have. So make some decisions. That's the first start.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you so much. This wraps it up. Thank you so much again for another awesome episode of Her Version. This community is expanding every single day and it's filled with females who are striving to do better than they did yesterday. For those of you that are new to this podcast and like content like this, make sure you hit that subscribe button. Make sure you follow, like, and share. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at the herversion.life website. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others. As always,